All right. So, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 15th, 2026, about 12:20 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are continuing our 18th book in our Book to React series. This is the autobiography of Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panther Party, a famous revolutionary group that is titled Revolutionary Suicide. The title of Huey P. Newton's memoir is Revolutionary Suicide. We are almost finished with the book. We are in the last section. We're in the last stretch of the book, in the final 6 chapters of part 6. We will be reading the first 3 chapters of part 6. They're titled Release, 29, and Fallen Comrade. Those are chapters 28 through 30, respectively. Hopefully you've been keeping up with the previous readings we've been doing, and hopefully you've been enjoying this process where we read a text from cover to cover with the people and give reactions live to it, and also interact with all the comments. So we got 2 live streams going right now. We have the one with the text where you can see the text that we're reading, and also the vertical one for all these slow Gen Z people out there who have the attention spans of gnats and cockroaches. We will be, like I said, we will be reading part 6 today. Without further ado, let's get into it, and shout out to everybody who's going to show love in the comment section. Let's go. Part 6 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. There is an old African saying, I am we. If you met an African in ancient times and asked him who he was, he would reply, I am we. This is revolutionary suicide. I, we, all of us are the one and the multitude. Moving on, chapter 28. What turns me cold in all this experience is the certainty that thousands of innocent victims are in jail today because they had neither money, experience, nor friends to help them. The eyes of the world were on our trial despite the desperate effort of press and radio to suppress the facts and cloud the real issues. The courage and money of friends and of strangers who dared stand for a principle freed me. But God only knows how many who were as innocent as I and my colleagues are today in hell. The daily stagger out of prison doors, embittered, vengeful, hopeless, ruined. And of this army of the wronged, the proportion of Negroes is frightful. We protect and defend sensational cases where Negroes are involved. But the great mass of arrested or accused black folk have no defense. There is desperate need of nationwide organizations to oppose this national racket of railroading to jails and chain gangs the poor, friendless, and black. The autobiography of W.E.B. Du Bois. Shout out to Nanny P up in the chat. They say hi. Shout out to Nanny P and everybody else joining the live stream. Very powerful comment from W.E.B. Du Bois, basically saying that, you know, in America's criminal justice system, because it is very criminal, there are many innocent black people behind bars. And one of the most saddening things about America is that every year, in fact, I would argue every month, there is a story of so-and-so man spent 40 years in jail, and is now freed after being found innocent. And 9 times out of 10, it's a black man. 9 times out of 10 in American society, you turn on the news, and I'm sure there was a story that happened either just last month or this month. Man spent 30 years, 40 years, 50 years in jail. And, well, come to find out, that black man actually didn't kill anybody. He didn't rape that white woman. It's so unfortunate that is our society. Go into the comments here. Nanny P says hi again. Shout out to Nanny P. And shout out to Ochance MLG. Ochance MLG and everybody else up in the comment section. Let's go to chapter 28 of Revolutionary Suicide, titled Release. So, Huey P says, there was no time to feel relief, let alone an illusion of freedom, once I had come through the gates. Before I got my bearings, one of the deputy sheriffs came over to me. We're going to have to shackle you, he said. I did not reply. They put chains around my waist and under my crotch. 2 chains went from my waist to each wrist and another from one hand to the other. Then they shackled my ankles and ran a chain from my crotch to the chains on my ankles. Finally, they put a 6-inch chain from one ankle to the other so that I had to shuffle when I walked. I could barely move my arms. The police carried my boxes while I shuffled about 25 yards to an unmarked car. I got in and tried to find a comfortable position. It was not easy. The 2 deputies got in front. While one of them was starting the engine, the other one said, "Wait a minute. I have to get my equalizer out of the trunk." I glanced back as he was coming around the car and saw him putting what looked like a snub-nosed .38 revolver in his belt. With his gun and me in chains, I guess we were equal. Okay, a little bit of sarcasm here. All right. I had not been in an automobile for 22 months, and it felt strange to be speeding down the highway at 80 miles an hour. We passed a large sign saying Huey Road, which pointed off to the right. I had seen it on the bus coming to the penal colony, and I remember telling the other inmates the last time they saw Huey, he was tearing up Huey Road at high speed. This time I passed it without imagining myself taking off up that little dirt road. The deputies talked to each other about how stupid it was of President Nixon to make the statement about Charles Manson the day before of the legal profession. Nixon is a man who should never stray from his speechwriter's notes, because every time he does, he sticks his foot in his mouth. Now there was a possibility that Manson would have to be given a new trial. So I'm not going to click the footnote here, but what I imagine is that Nixon said, this guy, Charles Manson is a criminal and he needs to be buried under the jail. And that's something you can't do if you're a public figure, because you're tainting the well. You're tainting the jury pool. You know, you're making it. You're giving the case to the defense of Charles Manson that he couldn't get a fair trial because the president of the United States came out in the public and said he's guilty. He's a crook. You get what I'm saying? So, yeah, continuing here. So, the deputies asked me what I thought my bail would be. I told them I had no idea. They guessed somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 and went on speculating about the amount and whether I could get out or not. I assured them that I would be released immediately, even with a bail of $1 million, because the people would not stand for my remaining in jail. They agreed that I probably would be released. I was always arrogant with policemen. If you take any other attitude with them, they interpret it as weakness, because they assume an innate superiority over you. When they stopped at a little truck cafe in King City to get coffee and donuts, they asked me if I wanted any, and I said no. Later, they asked me where H-Rap Brown was. Again, I had no idea. I cannot imagine why they asked me, since I certainly would not have told them, even if I had known. If I remember right, H-Rap Brown went on the run. He went underground for many years, I think, because he was accused of killing a cop or some other crime. But maybe I'm mixing something up. But that's probably why the police asked where H-Rap was. Anyway. Coming up on Salinas, we passed Soledad State Prison, eerie in the early morning light. Gray walls loomed up. Okay, there's a typo here. I think it means their gray walls loomed up, the walls of the prison. Silent and ominous in the half-light. I thought of all my brothers in there, and George Jackson. It was weird and unsettling to be such a short distance from them, without their having the slightest awareness of it. But they were probably asleep at that hour. The deputy said they were glad they did not work at Soledad because of the militancy of the prisoners and the constant trouble and upheaval. They talked about different prisons in the state and asked me about the penal colony. I described the layout and physical facilities, which are probably better than any other penitentiary in the state, with the exception of Chino. Chino has far better facilities, a swimming pool and a golf course, and prisoners are allowed to wear their own clothes. Also, security is less strict. The penal colony is only about 10 years old, so it is also cleaner than most. But all prisons are the same. An inmate has to live in a space 10 by 7.5, with a toilet, wash basin, desks, chair, bunk, and concrete floor, no matter where he is. When you are locked in a room like that day after day, it does not matter where you are. The deputies admitted that there seemed to be no answer to the problems of prisons, that they just do not work. Conjugal visits for prisoners would help, they seemed to think, the way it worked in Mexico, despite the poor physical facilities and conditions. I pointed out that since 80% of the inmates in the penal colony were homosexuals, it probably would not make much difference there. And everybody in the car laughed. Ha 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 ha. I added that part. So they talked for a while about Mexico, how nice it is there in the summer, and how beautiful the parks and buildings are, particularly in Mexico City. But one of them said that every time he goes to a Latin country, even Mexico, he is afraid a guy like Castro will take over and kidnap all the Americans and not let them return to the United States. I assured him that even if someone like Castro came to power, he would probably pay the cops' trip back on the fastest plane. This is what is done in Cuba. Flights for counter-revolutionaries leave frequently. Fidel's policy is that anyone who wants to should get out immediately. Even Cuban nationals, members of the bourgeoisie, are allowed to leave, and most of them now live in Miami. So many, in fact, that it is called Little Havana. Cops are generally uninformed and politically naive, and it's still the same today. But on the subject of socialism, they are especially ignorant. It was beginning to get light as we drove through Gilroy, 33 miles south of San Jose, about 5:30 a.m., all the way back to Oakland. I could not take my eyes off the passing landscape, yet my impressions were hazy, partly because we drove so fast, but mainly because it was just too much for me to take in. It was the sensation of being heavily bombarded with a variety of stimuli. Most people take the stimuli for granted, but after 2 years in a restricted and monotonous environment, it is impossible to absorb what you see. We passed houses, fields, farm laborers, animals, and all sorts of sights grown dim in my memory. The mountains in the distance, the sky, the movements of life. I wanted them all at once, but I could not handle it. It disturbed me. Shortly after Gilroy, we stopped at a gas station to fill up, and the driver asked me if I wanted to go to the bathroom. I said no, and he ambled around the side of the station while the other cops stayed with me. The attendant was a young kid who did not seem to know his way around cars. After he started the gas, he opened the front door of the car with the comment that the lights were on. When he hit the button to cut them, the cop became very tense, but the boy did not notice anything inside. Then he went to the front to check the water and oil. He opened the hood about the same time the other cop came out of the bathroom, and turning to the cop, he said, "What's this?" indicating something under the hood. When the cop told him it was a siren, the boy turned bright red, quickly closed the hood, and went around to finish the gas. Then he kind of peeked in the car, and when he saw my chains, he got even more flustered. When we pulled off, I watched him out of the rear window, standing there in amazement. We ran into some commuter traffic around San Jose, nothing too bad, and finally, about 7 a.m., arrived in Oakland. The streets were still deserted. I noticed immediately how many things had changed. There were buildings I had never seen before. We went by the construction site of the new Bay Area Rapid Transit building and the new museum that had been going up while I awaited trial. During those 11 months, I used to watch this day-to-day progress from the county jail. The deputies named the new buildings, telling me about them and trying to be friendly in their own way. When they indulged in small talk of a pleasant kind and asked me questions, I did not hesitate to answer them. Not that it brought us closer. Nothing so superficial will do that. But it is the easiest way to keep the situation cool. As a matter of fact, I recommend this kind of behavior no matter what is going through a person's mind. It is always to his advantage to keep his enemy off balance. I can't chat it up with police. I'm sorry. I know, Huey, that's good advice. You know, if the enemy comes and talks to you and they're respectful and they want to have a chat it up with them. I can't do it. Fuck the police. I hate the police. I cannot just chat it up with a cop. No, all cops are bastards. They're pigs. I can't just be like, yeah, the kids are fine. How are yours, Bob? No, fuck that. Anyway, I'm sorry. As we drove through the Oakland streets, The deputies talked to the police at the county jail and told them we were coming into the courthouse through the tunnel. The answer was to use the front entrance because the elevator was tied up. We swung around to the front of the building right across from the Lake Merritt Park, where little Bobby Hudson's rally was held after his funeral in 1968. It brought back memories. For the better part of a year, from the window of the county jail, I had watched the park and the people walking in it. Now a few people were on the street. How colorful their clothes seemed. This is what I mean by being bombarded with an overwhelming amount of stimuli all at once. I could not get a clear impression of any one thing. Everything tended to blur and become indistinct. The whole experience was devastating. Where I had been for 33 months, everyone wore the same clothes, did the same things, and went to the same place every day. You never wondered where people were going or what they were doing. On any other day, all you expected to happen was what had happened the day before, and the day before that. In my first few days outside of jail, I had to make an attempt to remain calm, to keep the action and unpredictability from exciting my nervous system. Even the sight of ordinary activities, such as cars stopping for traffic lights, some going in one direction, some in another, people in the street, was too much. When we stopped in the front of the jail, the shackles were removed from my legs, although the chains on my wrists and arms were left off. The people carried my baggage while I walked through the front door. A cop had come down to meet us from the jail on the 10th floor. His face was familiar. Unless we had a run-in, the cops did not make much of an impression on me. Then they just come and go. He says, locking me up or letting me out, and that is all there is to it. But this cop's face was too familiar to pass off. I tried to recall what kind of run-in I had with him. When we got to the elevator, this one had a kind of chicken smile on his face. Well, are you going to get your old suit back? Or old sweet back, he asked. I don't know, I answered, but I can do time any place in this jail. That's what I did before, and I can do it now, particularly since I will be probably out in a few hours. Yeah, I guess so, he replied. You think you'll make bail? How much do you think it will be? A couple of 100,000, maybe 500,000? The same old question. I'll be out in 2 hours, I said. Well, it really helps to be rich, eh, Newton? Maybe it does, I shot back, but I'm not rich. The people will sacrifice whatever is necessary and get me out. He changed the subject then. You've gotten big. You must be working out. That cops are so stupid. Can't you see that you're talking to a man with power? You get what I'm saying? You're talking to a man with power. The people are outside rallying, free Huey, raising hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. Meanwhile, you're worried about, well, did the Cleveland Browns win on Monday? Well, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Cops are so stupid. Prison guards are stupid. All sorts of authority figures are really stupid, especially in the American criminal justice system. They're all stupid. They're all really dumb. Fuck the police. I'm sorry, I had to rant that real quick. Continuing here. My mind was not on the conversation, said Huey P. Newton in his text, Revolutionary Suicide. I was still trying to place him, but I said, yeah, I worked out every day, he said. Yeah, that's what I should have been doing. He had trouble saying that. Suddenly, I remembered him. He had gotten pretty fat, but he was the same policeman I had a run-in with in solitary. All right? One night during my trial, about 1 a.m., this fellow came around to take the count with a black policeman. I was half asleep. He opened my door quickly, then started to close it. He asked, "Did I wake you up, you asshole?" I jumped up. The door was locked, but I guess I woke up half the jail shouting at him, calling him everything except a child of God, and inviting him back to open the door so he could show what kind of man he was. Shout out to Bill Clancy up in the chat. He says he loves Donald Trump. Bill Clancy is probably a pedophile. Continuing here. While I was yelling, Huey P. Newton says, the black policeman with him started to laugh as they walked down the hall. I do not know whether he was laughing at me or at his partner. Some of the other inmates who were awake thought he was laughing out of desperation. The other policeman would not come back. He was much too cowardly. The next day, when I went to court, the black cop was still on duty. He must have been pulling 2 shifts that day, and I asked him the white cop's name. He said that he thought we knew each other and were just kidding. I told him that he knew very well I did not kid around with any of them, including himself. The only relationship we had was that of prison guard, nothing else. I did not appreciate the other guard's remarks, I said, and I was definitely going to bring it up in court. The black cop said that if I brought it up in court, he would feel compelled to testify on my behalf and say that I was right and the cop was wrong. He had not said anything at the time. He repeated because he thought we played together all the time. He promised to tell the other cop about my reaction, and after I reminded him that I did not play with any of them, he said no more about it. It did not come up in court, and I never learned whether the black cop would have testified for me. All this was racing through my mind as we rode up the elevator. Once off the elevator, we walked into the bullpen, the waiting area of the jail. The shackles were taken off my hands and waist, and I was stripped and searched again. After I put my clothes back on, we went through the long booking and processing procedure. Then I was assigned to a cell in B tank, which is the receiving and reception tank. Right around the corner, about 15 feet away, was the hospital tank, where inmates are kept in semi-isolation. It holds only about 5 guys and inmates who have minor illnesses. It holds only about 5 guys and inmates who have minor illnesses are kept there, but never for very long. Most of the men who come there are either from death row at San Quentin or on their way to death row and awaiting sentence after conviction of first-degree murder. The regular tanks in the county jail all adjoin a day room outside the cells. Inmates are taken out of their cells at 7 in the morning and locked up again at 7 at night, spending the entire 12 hours in between the day room. They have no access to their bunks during the day. But in the hospital tank, the inmates can go back and forth to their cells whenever they please. The men on their way to death row are put in the tank because many of them need ready access to the legal material in their cells. They can also keep typewriters in the hospital tank, another taboo in the regular tanks. The hospital tank is called Little Death Row by inmates, because prisoners there are either from death row, fighting some part of the case, or they are on reversal prior to retrial. Most of the inmates from Alameda County on death row at Quentin went through this hospital tank at some point. I had been there on Little Death Row myself for 4 months while I was in the county jail serving time for the Odell Lee assault case. I had gotten to know a number of guys there then. All right, going to the comments. Bill Clancy, it says, this is Bill Clancy's comment, and it's disgusting to read. Bill Clancy says, I was in the Epstein files, and I'm very proud to say that I molested children along with Donald Trump. And then Bill Clancy leaves another comment and says, there's nothing wrong with the love between a man and a boy. Bill Clancy, you are a disgusting human being, and I don't associate with pedophiles. I know your president is a pedophile. I know most of the MAGA movement is filled with pedophiles, but Bill Clancy, please do not leave comments saying how much you love children, how much you love having sex with children. You are a disgusting human being, but it makes sense that you are a MAGA follower. Shout out to TDMY1C up in the comment section. Shout out to TDMY1C. Please, TDM, tell Bill Clancy to chill with his predilection for children, please. Continuing here. Within an hour, I was back in touch with inmates I had met there 33 months before. During the interval, some had gone away and come back again to jail on new beefs. One of them was a young guy called Nice Man. Nice Man had gained weight too, since I had last seen him. He was a big one, 6 feet 3 inches and 230 pounds. Very articulate and bright, but not well educated because he had spent most of his young life inside jails. But nobody was better at survival on the block. This time he was in for bank robbery or kidnapping. I'm not sure which. Of his 22 years, 11 had been spent in various juvenile halls, Tracy and Soledad. I asked the inmates about another friend, McPherson. He was a white guy I became pretty close to when we did time together in Little Death Row before he had been sent on to death row at Quentin. I had heard something about a reversal and it turned out to be true. McPherson was in the hospital tank right around the corner, so I yelled out to him. He was happy to hear my voice, and we cut up about old times for a while. When I asked him about his case, he told me he expected to draw another death penalty. He had been convicted again of first-degree murder, and he was going through his penalty phase starting the next week. McPherson has only one eye. He lost the other one at Santa Rita prison before he was charged with murder, in isolation where no one was allowed to talk to him. McPherson went out of his mind and stuck a pencil in his eye. The guard said that when McPherson put his pencil in his eye, he fell out shouting, "I killed Gotcher." Gotcher was a German engineer whom McPherson was accused and convicted of killing. But McPherson got a reversal because the appellate court ruled him insane at the time of the statement. They ruled that even if he had made the statement, it could not be used against him as a confession. At the new trial, they convicted him all over again when his cousin, who at first had been charged with the murder, took on a wheeler-dealer attorney for himself, got immunity from the prosecution, and then testified against McPherson. The cousin admitted participating in the murder but testified that McPherson did the killing, and no amount of denial could save McPherson. His cousin never did any time. About 10 a.m., two of my attorneys came to discuss my bail, which they thought would probably be about $100,000. They were trying to get me released on my own recognizance, but the outcome was uncertain. The district attorney seemed very indulgent and cooperative, which would have been surprising under any circumstances, but was particularly unexpected now, because the district attorney was Lowell Jensen, the prosecutor in my trial. He had succeeded Frank Coakley as district attorney of Alameda County. We puzzled over this new attitude and decided that Jensen knew bail in my case was inevitable. Therefore, he was being cooperative to show his fairness. Defeat would have been a strike against him, and bail was mandatory anyway, since I could no longer be tried for a capital offense. But how much would it cost? My attorneys had gone first to court, and the judge had sent them to the district attorney. When they tried that, Jensen had told them to see the judge. They were just passing the buck back and forth. But finally, when the district attorney was notified that the buck stopped with him, he resigned himself to it. All right. Shout out to Moon up in the chat, Moon51 up in the comment section. I appreciate Moon up in here. Shout out to him. Continuing here, Huey in revolutionary suicide. My lawyers pointed out that I had never jumped bail and had always appeared in court on time. Jensen said he believed that I would show up in court, so there was no question of not granting bail. While he did not want to upset the black community by setting bail too high, he also did not want to make his friends angry by setting it too low. As far as Jensen was concerned, justice had nothing to do with the procedure, only politics. My attorneys reminded him that in cases like mine, where a person has a reputation for showing up in court, bail is usually never higher than $5,000. Although Jensen agreed, he said he would have to set a higher bail because I had already been convicted, because of the seriousness of the matter, and because Eldridge Cleaver had jumped bail. My lawyers said we would agree to something like $10,000, although they felt that amount was too high. These negotiations took place in the district attorney's office on Tuesday morning, August 4th, and I was scheduled to appear in court the next day, Wednesday. While they talked, I waited in jail, and my attorneys reported from time to time. One thing that I don't understand, and maybe I need to just do more basic cursory research, but I remember vividly in high school learning the Constitution. And it's either in the Bill of Rights or one of the articles of the Constitution that unreasonable bail is unconstitutional. Having high or abnormally high bail is against the Constitution. Yet and still in America, it's not uncommon to hear, oh, so-and-so is accused of breaking and entering into a house that was unoccupied, and his bail is set at $20,000. Nobody has $20,000 on hand. Now, of course, to pay bail, a lot of the times you only have to pay a percentage of that amount. So $20,000 becomes $2,000 or something like that. But that's still a high amount of money. And once again, in America, in the Constitution, explicitly it says everybody is innocent until proven guilty. I was this close to saying guilty until proven innocent because that's sort of how like it plays out in real life. But I don't understand how people say on one hand, the Constitution is followed pretty well in the United States of America, yet unreasonably high bail is very common throughout America, whether that be for federal crimes or state crimes. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand that. Somebody explain. If you're a constitutional lawyer, constitutional expert, explain how $20,000 or $100,000 is not unreasonably high bail and therefore not unconstitutional. You know what I'm saying? But I digress. Continuing here. Meanwhile, nothing much had changed at Alameda County Jail. Poor food, dirty cells, harassment by guards, and 100 other human indignities were routine. Nice Man and I had a good discussion about the Black Panther Party. He was a tank trustee with more freedom than the rest. One of Nice Man's duties was to pass out food to the rest of the prisoners at mealtime. For this, he got an extra sandwich and coffee. Every day around 6 p.m., the police escorted the trustees, bringing the food from the kitchen to the tank, and Nice Man passed it out in the day room. That Tuesday, just 12 hours after I arrived, a number of the inmates were inside their cells. I do not know why. Maybe they were not feeling well. This meant that the cop was supposed to open the gate to each cell so the trustee could give the prisoner his food. Otherwise, the trustee would have to slide the tray under the door. There is an excellent reason not to slide the trays. The bars of the cells are filthy, and if a tray of food is slid under, crud is likely to fall into it. More than 2 years before this, when I was first in the Alameda County Jail, a grand jury had toured the jail, and one of their recommendations had been that no food was to pass underneath the door. When Nice Man asked the guard to open up, the cop refused and told Nice Man to slide the tray underneath. Nice Man refused, explaining why. At this point, the cop went into an irrelevant diatribe, telling Nice Man if he acted like a man, he would treat him like a man. Nice Man said that he did not want to be treated like a man. He wanted to be treated like a convict. That's funny. And in turn, he would treat the cop like a policeman. Nice Man is an interesting person to watch in tense situations because he moves when he means things. And now he was making little movements with his arms and legs. The argument went back and forth for some time. Finally, Nice Man slid the food underneath the door, but the argument continued. I tried to get Nice Man to cool it. I know what happens in situations like that. When you are locked down, there is no win. And while you have to defend some principles all the way, others do not infringe upon basic rights, and it is best to go along until conditions are more favorable. In other words, it is hard to win, and most of the time you lose. Before going too far, you should be sure that the principle is worth your life. I love how here, throughout the book, by the way, Huey P. Newton is dropping game. Like, he takes these little anecdotes either from prison or his time in the streets and says, this is what I learned, and this is like helpful ways of strategizing and thinking about, how to move to get to a better position. You know what I'm saying? So I love stories like that. Continuing here. So Huey says, now it escalated. Every time the cop said something, Nice Man replied. Sliding the food under the door was no longer the subject. It was just an angry argument heavy with insults. I tried again to get Nice Man to stop arguing, but he would not. He just stood there at the door to the tank, going back and forth with the cop, moving and twitching. Everyone else was eating quietly and watching. Abruptly, the cop left. I told Nice Man about the grand jury finding years before. He was absolutely right. I said, but he ought either to do something or not do it, but not argue about it. He should just let the chips fall where they may, because arguing would not get anything down. 10 minutes later, when all was cool again, the cop came back and ordered Nice Man to roll it up. He was going to the hole. Okay, so they're sending Nice Man to the hole because he didn't want his food slid under the door. Nice Man flew into a rage. He was not going, and the cop went away for reinforcements. In the county jail, every prisoner has a wooden box where he keeps his possessions. As soon as the cop left, Nice Man got his box out, jumped on it, and broke off a piece of wood about 4 feet long and 2 inches thick. Then he stood there waiting for the onslaught. The cop who had provoked this incident was black, and now he came striding back with 6 of his white colleagues. 7 of them opened the gates, ordered everybody else to roll into the cells, and told Nice Man to come with them to the hole. Nice Man stood silently, clutching his club. Impasse. Had we rolled into our cells, Nice Man would have been left alone in the day room with them. Everyone looked at me. I did not move. Nobody else did either. If I had moved, it would have been to go down with Nice Man, since he was a friend of mine and 100% right. In wondering why the other inmates did not roll in, it finally dawned on me that I was the reason. So we stood frozen, the cops with their long clubs and their mace, their inmates watching, and Nice Man with his broken box. This kind of unified action is unusual among inmates in jail. I have been in a number of uprisings at the Alameda County Jail, and each time there was always a split between the guys who would ease back into their cells and those who were willing to defy the guards. This time the prisoners were solid: white, black, and Chicano. Finally, 2 cops convinced Nice Man to come out, and I went over to the bars to intervene and asked the policeman if I could speak with him. He said no, and another cop shouted, "If no one will roll in, do you guys know what this means? This is a riot, an insurrection, disobeying orders. You have one last chance." Still no one moved. Then the other cop turned to me and said, "Newton, did you have something to say to me?" I went back to the bars and spoke to him in a low voice, telling him that he was wrong because he had provoked the whole thing. It was a matter of saving face now, I said, and Nice Man also had to save face and not be intimidated. They could both save face by compromise. I would try to convince Nice Man to move to another take with the same facilities as B Tank. In this way, they would still be in authority, but Nice Man would not be punished. Which was best, because he had been right all along. If they would not accept the plan, trouble was certain. Since I was going to court to be released the next day, I really did not want a battle, but I had made up my mind to be involved if it was forced on me. I was not going to let them take Nice Man to the hole without a fight. Powerful. So Huey's about to be released, and he's like, I got to stand up for this brother, even though he was wrong. Kind of, you know what I'm saying? He didn't want his food being nasty, you know what I mean? He didn't want that nasty-ass cred on his food, so it makes sense that he got upset about this. And the police trying to send him to the hole because he wanted his food, not under the door is not a justifiable reason, right? So once again, Huey is a true revolutionary. He's a man. He's a leader. You know what I'm saying? They say what's more powerful, money, power, or respect? I think Huey's life proves that respect is very powerful. You know what I'm saying? Because the prisoners usually would have ran up in their cells had the police said, it's locked down, everybody in their cells, this is a riot. But they stood outside just because Huey was there, because they respected him as a man and his leadership. So, very powerful. Anyway, continuing here. While I talked, the police gathered around and listened. Finally, they promised they would not jump Nice Man once he came out of his cell, and that they would not put him in the hole. Then I went over to Nice Man and explained the plan to him. At first he refused, then reluctantly agreed to go out, dropping his weapon inside his cell and walking down the hall with the guards close behind. We listened for scuffling, but heard nothing. About 15 minutes after the incident, the same black cop came back and ordered everyone to roll in. Then after the inmates were locked up, he called me to the bars and informed me that I would be isolated the next day. When I asked him why, he cited the incident. Was he saying that I was responsible for the incident? I asked. No, he said. My presence was the reason the prisoners would not roll in when ordered and the reason they resisted as one group. I told him that I doubted that I was the cause of their united action. The prisoners showed their solidarity because they were tired of being mistreated and pushed around. As for me, I went on to say I could do time anywhere, including the hole, because I did not have long to stay. So move me wherever you want to, I told him. There is no argument whatsoever. Then I added that he did not have to wait until the next day. I could go right away because I wanted to get situated at once and be comfortable. I do not like to move once I get settled in a cell. He began to excuse himself, saying it's not my fault. It's already on the movement sheet that you have to be isolated anyway. You have to wait for the next shift to isolate you in the morning. But I told him no explanation was necessary. They could move me right away. Actually, the hole was a bluff. Okay, so they're not going to send him into solitary confinement. They had me scheduled to go to Little Death Row around the corner and took me there that night. When I arrived, I found my friend McPherson and 2 other guys. One of them, a brother with a murder beef on him, who was a real psych case. He should not have been in jail, but in a hospital, or rather in good hands, because the hospitals are no good. He was obsessed with his earlier time in a hospital where they filled him with poison and gave him shock treatments. Back in the hospital, he felt sure he would die. He had earlier killed a guy on the street who approached him the wrong way and put his hands on him, a violation of the code on the block. For people like that, he explained that he kept a sharp knife sitting on his porch, sharpening his knife with a stone all day long. watching to make sure that no pervert messed with the little girls in his neighborhood. The new murder beef went like this. One day, as he sat in a restaurant talking to a lady friend, some guy rushed up and poked his finger on his chest saying, "Don't talk to my woman." When the guy did that, the brother slit his throat. He did not want to be in jail, and he feared returning to the hospital. As far as the hospital was concerned, he was right to be fearful, but he did need help. He should not have been in jail. The other white guy had been on death row in Quentin for a few years before his reversal. He was preparing to go to trial again. McPherson, the fourth guy, was my old friend, convicted again and waiting for sentencing. He thought he had little chance of escaping big death row. Little death row was a depressing experience. When I had been there before, I was facing the gas chamber too and felt more a part of it. We were all in the same thing. McPherson, myself, and another guy who is now on big death row. Back then, I had accepted little death row as a thing to be dealt with, but now I would be on the streets in a few hours while the others might never walk out. Knowing I could do little for them left me feeling like an outsider and also privileged, and I never liked to feel privileged, but they all wished me luck. I bedded down for the night with these things going around in my mind, knowing that it was the last night I would spend in jail for some time. It had been a long day and I rested well. The next morning, I had to be in court at 9:15. My attorneys came early, and we talked for a short time until I was herded into an elevator with so many other inmates we could hardly breathe. They were all interested in my case, and knowing that I would be out soon, asked me questions and tried to find out if I would do errands for them and other favors. On the 5th floor, we were placed in holding cells while we waited for the court session to begin. My name was first called. As I entered the packed courtroom, the first people I saw were Charles Gary, Faye Stender, and Barney Dreyfus at the attorney's table. Behind them were my family and friends and quite a few reporters I had come to know over the past 2 years. Going in to the packed courtroom and seeing the reporters on one side, my family, friends, and spectators on the other was like a flashback to the same scene 2 years before. The whole thing seemed to be starting over again. It reminded me of a line from Kafka's The Trial that I think of when events seem to be repeating themselves. When Kay, the hero of the novel, is about to be executed, he says, "At the beginning of my case, I wanted it to finish, and at the end of it, I wanted it to begin again." At first, Kay is bothered by the confusion of going through the court system, the slow wheels of justice or injustice, the questioning, the stifling routine. It is a slow, draining process, which Kay equates with the absurd toll and the endless striving of life. I felt the same emotions, wanting the absurdities and the eternal toil to end. Then at the end, I was not quite ready for it to be over, and felt a vague desire for it to start all over again. 2 years were obliterated. The judge sat in the same seat as if he had never moved from it. The attorney stood at the same table. Perhaps the 2 years had only been a nightmare between days in court, and now I had awakened to go through the trial again and again in a vicious circle. All right. Shout out to Claire Peace. Shout out to Claire Peace up in the comment section. This is a repeat offender, a person I hate very much. I hate a lot of my followers, and I hate Claire Peace. Top tier. Top tier hate I have is for Claire Peace. Continuing here. Then, with a surge of happiness at seeing my old friends in the spectator section, I realized that it was really over. It had been worth it. The perseverance, the hanging on, the not ever giving up. And now I could return to them with my head held high because I had not let them down. And they, on their part, had not let me down. Together we had endured and prevailed over the ordeal without letting it change us in essential ways. That was my feeling. Suddenly the bad dream of 33 months seemed insignificant. The district attorney had promised to come up with a happy medium regarding bail. His happy medium turned out to be $50,000, and when he recommended this amount to the judge, it was accepted. This was a high and unjust sum. Who has that kind of money? I knew it would be a hardship for the people to raise that much cash. The judge did not show any courage either by lowering the bail or even raising it. He went right along with the recommendation, so it was really the district attorney who set bail. This is the kind of justice dealt out to the people. The defense attorney is also an officer of the court and is supposedly on the same footing as the district attorney. But the district attorney has many more privileges because he represents the established order, the powerful and the rich, who see to it that he is backed up and supported. The defense attorney merely represents the people. Shout out to I Am the Bars. Shout out to I Am the Bars up in the chat. Cool sweater. I appreciate that. I like this sweater too. I know. And I wish y'all could see the tie because the tie is popping as well. The tie is very nice. Anyway, I'm hoping that Huey finishes up with these courtroom stories because it's the least interesting part of the book. I'm sorry. The least interesting part of the story is when Huey is talking about being in court, his trial, his release. I'm just not a fan of courtroom stories. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, after my bail was set, I returned to the holding cell. The inmates waiting to go to court offered congratulations all around, happy that I would soon be free. Then I was taken back upstairs where I sat with my attorneys in the lawyer's room and discussed the bail situation. We had raised some money, but not enough, and they were in favor of getting it from a bail bondsman, but I was against the idea. Rather than come out right away, I wanted to stay in jail until all the bail had been raised. This was important. A bail bondsman fee was about $5,000, and I felt that if all the money could be raised without him, that $5,000 was better spent for community programs. Damn, Huey was real. Damn, Huey was real. Huey was a real one. He said, I could get out of jail right now because I have the $5K. But if I can get the people to show support, show love, and we can use that $5,000 for something else, that's a better way of actually doing community work. Once again, his life is propaganda of the deed. Shout out to I Am Bars. They say that they have a dark blue sweater similar to this. And that they, the tie, and the same thing, funny thing, as I said the same thing about the tie on his. So he was wearing the tie with the sweater. You know, this is Sunday casual. You know, it's Sunday casual right now. So we're just chilling at the house, being very presentable while we read Revolutionary Suicide and continue the work of educating the people. Educating ourselves as well. And if you haven't read this book, I highly suggest you check it out. And I Am Bar says they subbed. I appreciate that. Welcome to the community. On this channel, we do movie reviews. On this channel, we read books and react to books. There's also a little bit of travel vlogging. There's also, content talking about the current political climate, not only in America, but different parts of the world. So this is a varied and diverse channel, but the core of this channel is centered on travel, movies, and books. Travel, movies, and books. So if you're into those things, then holla at me, stay subbed. We're going to be doing a lot of that on this channel. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. Huey P. Newton says, in Revolutionary Suicide, argument was intense. The attorneys and all my brothers said it was more important that I hit the street right away to give the movement a positive jolt. I argued that the party has always discouraged putting up 10% bond for other comrades. Policy has been to stay in jail until the whole amount was raised, so that the party recovered the whole amount. In the first 4 years of the party, we have been forced to raise several $1 million in bail around the country. If the 10% had gone to pay bail's bondsman fees, had been channeled into community programs, we would have been better off. To me, it was a matter of principle to stay in jail, but I was overruled. In the end, it all came to nothing anyway. No bail bondsman had an insurance company that would let him put up the money. We had to raise it all. All right? So, Claire Peace, you can try to report me if you want, but I don't give a fuck. Fuck you, Claire Peace, and fuck everybody like you. You are an evil, wicked person, Claire Peace. You are not a Christian. You are not a good person. I Am Bar says, that's dope. Have you read Powernomics, the National Plan to Empower Black America by Dr. Claude Anderson? I have not read it, but I will read it if it's a suggestion you make. But I would just like to argue that black capitalism will not get us free. On this channel, we do not endorse capitalism of any sort, especially the type that says, you know what we all need to do as black folks to get liberated? Open an LLC. You know how we're all going to get free? Through S-Corps. Nah, fuck that. Black capitalism will not free black people. In fact, black capitalism will enslave us more. It will make things worse, because at the root of capitalism is the idea that one person or a group of people enrich themselves off of the labor of others. It's off of the labor of others. So if we have black folks opening LLCs and hiring other black folks, yes, there will be some people that will make some money and become successful, but it will never be enough to get liberated. And our fight is not even about money. There are some rich niggas who are still niggas, and that's the point. That is the point. So I'm going to continue here. So one more interesting thing that Huey is saying right here, during the time that the Black Panthers were very, very active, in the beginning, they were against paying for the bail bondsmen to bail out their comrades when they're behind enemy lines, meaning in jail. And he's saying that, when you pay a bail bondsman to get you out on a $50,000 bond, you're paying $5,000 that you'll never see again. And Huey is saying, like, the party could have saved so much money by actually raising the amount that they needed to bail a comrade out. And that $5,000 that went to the bail's bondsman could have just gone into the community programs. Anyway, all right. I'm going to continue here. Okay. All right. I did not return to my cell, Huey P. Newton says, but remained in the attorney's room. I was hungry now. On leaving the penal colony, I had resolved not to eat until I was free. I simply fasted. In some respects, Alameda County Jail had changed. It did not seem as dirty as it once had been, but the food was still unacceptable. Also, everyone washes his own tray in a 5-gallon bucket of water. And with 30 guys washing in one bucket, the water gets really slimy. Part of my resolution to fast had to do with the lack of sanitary methods of cleaning the utensils. It is a miracle that everyone does not come down with dysentery or worse. While we were waiting, the lawyers noticed a group of police leaving the building with boxes of clubs. They must be about to release you, he said. They're going out with clubs. After this, some prisoners passed through the room, a couple of brothers out of the tank. I gave them the power sign, and they returned it. Power sign, all power to the people, closed fist, you know what I'm saying? Claire Peace, I am not a disgusting man. The disgusting man is the one in the Oval Office who said he wants to have sex with his own daughter and is in the Epstein files, possibly molesting children as young as 10 years old. You're a sick person for claiming to be a Christian but loving Donald Trump. And Claire Peace, you're a woman, and I mean this with all respect. Please get off my penis. Please get off my dick. I know I'm a very handsome chocolate man, but I will not go to the UK and put cock in your musty, dusty pussy. No, leave me alone. I have a beautiful, sexy wife who I love and cherish so dearly. And Claire Peace, I know you are fascinated and very horny for me, but I need you to relax and leave me alone. You can worship MAGA in a right-wing live stream. Do not come over here. This is not a right-wing cock-sucking live stream. And Claire P says, yes, you are good looking. I know I am. I am a very sexy, handsome, melanated man. Thank you, Claire Peace, for the comment. I know I am a sexy, melanated man, but I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. That means I do not follow right-wing ideology like yourself. You are not well-liked in the community. You are hated. You are a disgusting little monster. That's what you are, Claire Peace. You are a disgusting human being who is not a Christian. You are not a Christian. You can't be a right-winger and a Christian. Those are incompatible. I'm sorry, ma'am. Anyway, Huey P says, a few moments later, one of the sheriff's deputies came in to ask me to go directly across the street upon my release in order to avoid a confrontation with the police. A crowd had gathered outside in anticipation of a rally to be held at Lake Merritt Park as soon as I got out. The people were blocking the street, he said, and in the interest of the court, they would have to clear it. He had a big, sneaky smile on his face. I looked into his cold blue eyes and told him I would leave the jail, and that was it. Then my attorneys signed some papers, and I went back to my cell to pick up my paraphernalia and bid all the inmates goodbye. I had to do this quickly because, again, I felt guilty over my good fortune, while so many of them would have to go without freedom for a long time, perhaps even until the climax of the revolution. My only considering thought was that perhaps after my release, I could do something to hasten that event. Okay? My lawyers took my boxes, and I went to the gate and walked out of the jail on the 10th floor. Ahead, along the hall, was a solid wall of newspapermen and TV reporters, cameras and lights. Everyone was yelling, asking questions, demanding answers. I tried to make my way to the elevator with my brothers, Walter, Jr., Melvin, David Hilliard, and a couple of Black Panthers clearing the way. We managed to get in the elevator, but at the last minute, with the desperate lunge, reporters crowded in with us. We started down, but the overloaded elevator stopped cold, just below the 4th floor. We walked the rest of the way down the stairs. On the 1st floor, we made our way out to the main entrance on Lake Merritt Park. It was a bright blue sky day, just the kind of day I had wanted. Looking ahead, I could see thousands of beautiful people. Looking ahead, I could see thousands of beautiful people and a sea of hands, all of them waving. When I gave them the power sign, the hands shot up in reply and everyone started to cheer. God, it was good. I love that sentence. God, it was good. I felt this tremendous sense of release, of liberation, like taking off your shirt on a hot day and feeling free, unbounded by anything. Later, I did take off my shirt. Okay, Huey was too crunk. Huey got out of jail, took his shirt off, like, yeah, bitch, we free, yeah. They let a panther out, bitch, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Later, I did take my shirt off, but it was obvious now that we would not be able to get out the front door. A mass of cheering supporters stretched from the steps all the way across the street into the park. I had to fight back the tears. It was wonderful to be out, but even more exhilarating to see the concern and emotion of the people. The crush was so overwhelming that we turned back and went to the other exit. But the people quickly ran around to the other side, and as we went down the stairs and into the street, they surged around us, shouting joyfully, carrying us along. Okay. All right. Claire, I do not care about... Don't make me sick my wife on you. I'm sorry, Claire. You might have to... Acting might have to come in here and get on your ass, Claire, because I do not care about how you look. I only care about how you think. I can't see any of you, okay? I know I have some very cool followers and subscribers, but I also have some weirdos. And Claire, you're becoming a weirdo. I think you're mentally unstable, Claire, and you need to get some help. You need to get some help. You need to find a nice British man. Okay, Claire, leave me alone. Leave me alone. I'm here to educate the people. I know I might be your sexy college professor, but ma'am, I am committed to my beautiful wife. I'm committed to the struggle. I'm committed to revolution. I'm not committed to dusty, musty British MAGA supporters. No, not at all. Not at all, Claire. Be gone. Be gone, Claire. My sisters, Leola, Doris, and Myrtle, ran up to me, and we embraced. Faye Stender, Alex Hoffman, and Edward Keating were in front of me, while Charles Gary was swamped by newsmen. My brothers Melvin and Walter were there, David and Pat Hilliard, Masai Hewitt, the Minister of Education, and many Black Panther comrades. It was almost a stampede. I could not walk. I felt I was suffocating, but it did not matter in the euphoria. I just held on to my relatives, friends, and comrades, and was dragged along about my feet, my feet hardly touching the ground. It was a beautiful day. When we finally got to the car, we could not move it because of the crush. The only way to clear the area was to climb up on top of the car. First, I asked them to clear the street, but they demanded that I say something. I was going to make a speech and hold an impromptu rally right then and there. But from my vantage point, I could see the police edging toward the crowds with their clubs, shields, and helmets. They were itching to move in. Since it is against party principles to encourage mass confrontations with the police, if it can be avoided, I just said a few words and asked them to clear the street. They still would not leave, but demanded more. So I told them to go to Bobby Hudson Memorial Park, where we would hold a rally. At that, the people broke for their cars, which was fortunate since it slowed the cops down. Now we had to do something. I had lied to get the people out of there and away from the police. No rally was scheduled for Bobby Hudson Memorial Park. And I sent a brother to the park to tell them we could not come there that day for security reasons. Everyone, my lawyers included, advised me not to show up unprotected at big gatherings like this. It was just an open invitation for some maniac to take a shot at me. There was still so much feeling about the case in Oakland that we decided to wait for the cooler times before I appeared at mass gatherings. Yeah, I'm surprised Huey didn't get assassinated. Okay? I'm surprised Huey did not get assassinated. Anyway, Acty is up in the comments. Acty's up in the comments, says, stop harassing my husband. That's right. Tell him, Acty. Okay. Acty, relax. Just tell her that MAGA, being MAGA is not okay. She can be MAGA, but she can't be Christian, Claire. All right? Acty, just handle her. And Claire, I will no longer be reading your comments. Acty will be responding. That is who is most important. That's who I love dearly. I love my wife dearly. I love her more than I love any of you motherfuckers who I mostly hate. I mostly hate most of my subscribers. All close to be 6,000 of you. We're inching close to 6,000 subs, and I hate most of you. Literally, I can count on one hand who I don't hate. Continuing here. Quick water break. Okay. All right, continuing. I wanted to go directly home, but my brothers and sisters thought it would be too much of a shock for my father, who was not well and unable to sustain high emotion. My mother was in the hospital. She knew nothing of my release, but Melvin and the others figured she could handle it better than my father. Before I saw her, however, I went to a friend's house, got out of my prison clothes, and went to a news conference at Charles Gary's office. The news conference was unusual. Because it included a lot of movement people I had come to like over the months in jail, it was anything but the kind of cool encounter I usually have with the regular news media. A question would come at me, and when I started to answer, I would suddenly realize that this was a person I wanted to rap with personally. This happened over and over again with people there that day. Some of the establishment press came, but it was 90% underground press. At this press conference, I offered Black Panther troops to the National Liberation Front of the People's Republic of Vietnam. God damn, that's gangster. That's gangster. He told the Vietnamese people, listen, y'all fighting the American fascists coming over there trying to take over your country. We'll send you Black Panther fighters. Damn, that nigga's gangster. That's gangster. Anyway, when we left the news conference, I went to the hospital to see my mother. It was a joyous reunion. Later, when my father and I met, he was deeply moved and wept. He told me he had not expected to live long enough to see me freed from prison. During the first few days out of jail, I wondered when reality would come again. In relation to myself, to the world around me, to all that was happening to me, I had literally forgotten how to live outside. I had to develop all over again my old reflex actions to avoid being startled or puzzled by certain phenomenon. People who have never served time in prison do not realize that a large percentage of their behavior is a conditioned response involving no reasoning process. They instinctively react in the right way because they are used to the familiar patterns in their lives. Social stimuli and social forces do not baffle them. Cut off from all of this for a few years, life around me at first seemed jerky and out of synchronization. All the sounds, movements, and colors coming on simultaneously, television, telephone, radio, people talking, coming and going, doorbells and phones ringing, were dizzying at first. Ordinary life seemed hectic and chaotic and quite overwhelming. I even had to figure out what to eat and what time I was going to bed. In prison, all this had been decided for me. Walking through the streets was an indescribable experience, the closest I have ever felt to being truly free, with people walking by, recognizing me and waving. I went everywhere, visiting people in the community, to the surprise of many who never expected to see me on the street, only on television or maybe in Hollywood after I was released. But I was determined to get back among them. I walked in Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond, and San Francisco. I went to 7th Street, Sacramento Avenue, Portorero Hill, Hunters Point, Richmond, North Richmond, West Oakland, Peralta Street, Cypress Street, East Oakland, and Parchester Village. I visited several bars where I had done a lot of recruiting, and everywhere I got the same reaction. People wondered why I had come back to them. I explained that neither news reporters nor television cameras had got me out of prison. The people had freed me, and I had come back to thank them and be with them. Sounds like Huey P. Newton was hitting the street like J. Cole. If you've been watching those videos, J. Cole outside in the streets selling his double album for $1. Though that makes no sense, it's a good way to connect, I guess. It's a, hand-to-hand, grassroots, word-of-mouth marketing, I guess. So I like the rollout J. Cole is doing, and it sounds like he bit off Huey P. Newton. Because Huey P. hit the streets right after making bond, making bail. After they overturned his case. He free like OJ all day outside. What up? Continuing here. Huey P says in Revolutionary Suicide, at Father Earl Neal's church, St. Augustine's, I talked to members of his congregation. That too was a warm experience. Father Neal is a young black Episcopal priest who has worked with the black community and the party since coming to Oakland. We consider him our chaplain. He was involved in civil rights in Mississippi in the early 1960s, and he knows all about brutality and violence. During my trial, he came often to the courtroom to lend his support. Although people received me warmly, I was at first assembled. Our relationship had changed. There was now an element of hero worship that had not existed before I got busted. But I wanted our rapport to get back to where it was before I went to jail. That is, a relationship based on face-to-face communication between people working together for survival. I think their faith and trust in me was restored, although perhaps it will never be the same again. The earlier close family tie has been enlarged by an image of me created through publicity in the media. So much had been written, so much said that I was distracted from them. There was a slight estrangement. It would be overcome. All this time, I was under immense pressure to give interviews, to fill speaking engagements, to appear on talk shows and television programs, but I accepted none of these for about 6 months. I even received a brochure from some Hollywood outfit. It contained a newspaper clipping about me and a letter saying, "You're star quality," or something like that, which would have been amusing had it not been such an overt capitalist attempt to co-opt the revolution. Too many so-called leaders of the movement have been made into celebrities and their revolutionary fervor destroyed by mass media. They become Hollywood objects and lose identification with real issues. Tamika Mallory, the civil rights activist during the Black Lives Matter protests, still is not getting away from being criticized for doing a Chevy commercial or a Cadillac commercial or something like that. Yeah, if you're a revolutionary, I don't think you can be doing commercials. I'm sorry. I don't care how much the bag is for. If they're giving you the bag to, donate to charity or something like that, you can't be doing Hollywood commercials. You can't be selling Ford pickup trucks and Cadillacs and then at the same time say, power to the people. And that's not saying that a revolutionary or a socialist can't have money. Of course, you need money to survive under capitalism, but there's a limit to how far you will go to help support and continue to sustain this capitalistic system. Anyway. They became Hollywood objects and lose identification with the real issues. The task is to transform society. Only the people can do that. Not heroes, not celebrities, not stars. A star's place is in Hollywood. The revolutionary's place is in the community with the people. A studio is a place where fiction is made, but the Black Panther Party is out to create nonfiction. We are making revolution. Beautiful. That's the end of chapter 28. Very cool chapter. Hopefully Huey is done. Hopefully Huey is done talking about prison and court and jail, because those last 3 chapters were very hard to get through. But I'm very interested now to hear more about his community organizing, the activism, the structuring of the Black Panthers, that sort of stuff. And let's take a quick water break before we start chapter 29. All right, we're going to be reading chapter 9 and then chapter 30, and then we're going to call it a day. So this is the second to last chapter we're doing. Chapter 29. People who come out of prison can build up the country. Misfortune is a test of people's fidelity. Those who protest at injustice are people of true merit. When the prison doors are opened, the red dragon will fly out. Ho Chi Minh, Word Play 2, Prison Diary. Beautiful. We need to read some Ho Chi Minh on this channel. All right, chapter 29, Rebuilding. Back on the street, I quickly became involved again in the life and death issues that govern existence in the black community. The most important task before us was to free Bobby Seale and Ericka Huggins, who were in jail in Connecticut awaiting trial on first-degree murder charges. Bobby and Ericka should never have spent one day in jail for the ridiculous charges concerning Alex Rackley. It was all part of an establishment plot to push Bobby into a death sentence or a jail cell, which they had been trying to do ever since the party was formed. After failing in Sacramento and Chicago, the establishment made its most serious attempt with the murder charge in Connecticut. Strong and effective counteractions were needed to defeat it. Then there were the Soledad brothers, Comrades George Jackson, Fleta Drumgo, and John Clutchett, who were nearing trial for their lives on a trumped-up charge of murdering a prison guard. The party had provided the initial funds and support to get their defense committee in operation, and we were working hard to give them greater support. We were also helping the defense of Los Siete de la Raza, the 7 Chicanos who are awaiting trial in San Francisco on charges of killing a police officer. My own pending case seemed insignificant compared with the pressures the establishment was bringing to bear on our noble warriors. I was facing only 13 more years in jail, but my comrades, every one of them, faced death. Let's soak in that paragraph, because Huey is out of jail, and he's like, okay, what's on the agenda now? Oh shit, Bobby Seale is being charged with murder like I was in Connecticut. We have to find a way to get him out. We have the Soledad brothers, our comrades behind enemy lines, who, if I remember right, George Jackson never officially joined the Black Panther Party. George Jackson was leading another organization called the Black Guerrilla Family, which is supposed to be like an offshoot of the Black Panthers behind bars. So that's another thing. And then thirdly, Huey says there's a bunch of Latinos who have an organization, Los Siete de la Raza. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm going to say that that is another group he is saying that we need to support because they are awaiting trial for another alleged killing of a police officer. So what does this tell us? This tells us that internationalism, solidarity amongst different types of groups, people in the free world, in behind bars, people that are black and non-black, are our allies, no matter where they come from. And I'm sick of people who are claiming FBA or ADOS or something like that, looking at groups like the Black Panthers and projecting onto them this cultural, nationalist, racial group only bullshit. It's not that. The original Black Panthers, in Huey P. Newton's own book, he is saying right here that solidarity and unity with groups other than black people is essential to the Black Panther cause. That does not mean that we forget all about our issues as black people, no, but that doesn't mean that we dismiss all other issues of other people as having nothing to do with us, because they are interlinked in the system of capitalism and American imperialism and oppression. Anyway, so yeah, shout out to Acti up in the chat. She says that's so relatable today with all these crimes committed by ICE. Facts. You know, it's amazing that we're living in a time now where the police are murdering citizens out in the streets, and the police aren't getting murdered back. Now, it's very interesting that at this time in American history, the late 60s and all through the 70s, the left was hyperactive. They were bombing shit, shooting up shit, allegedly, and you know, a lot of cops were dropping. Bodies were dropping. You know what I'm saying? And that was a time when there was a lot of protests and activity, and it's surprising that it hasn't gotten to that point now. And I think the reason it hasn't gotten to that is because people still have hope of the democratic process still working. But I think the limits are being tested of that. And we don't want violence. We want a bloodless revolution, but we need a revolution. We want a bloodless revolution because the police are working people too. I know I say fuck cops, but it's not them as people. It's because of the job and what it does to the person. You get what I'm saying? But we want a bloodless revolution. We want a bloodless coup. But I think the ball's in the fascist court. If the fascists keep playing stupid games, they're going to win stupid prizes. Shout out to Stevie England up in the chat as well for showing love. Let's continue right here. So, A number of other party matters also required action. When I got out of prison in August 1970, it was less than a month before the preliminary session of the Revolutionary Constitutional Convention to be held in Philadelphia over the Labor Day weekend. The second session was scheduled for Thanksgiving weekend in Washington, D.C. It had been Eldridge Cleaver's idea to hold these conventions. I was never enthusiastic about them, but because the Central Committee of the party went along with Eldridge, I followed their direction. The purpose of the conventions was to discuss the plight of black people and to write a new constitution for the United States. I could not see much point in spending time and effort writing a constitution when we had no power to implement it. Eldridge was then in Algeria, and we spoke by telephone about this on several occasions. I pushed the point of view that our most urgent commitment was to build a strong base of community support behind Bobby and Ericka, as well as the Soledad brothers. Eldridge expressed some agreement with me, and toward this goal, we arranged for Kathleen Cleaver, who had great drawing power, to return and speak at the Washington session. My address at the Philadelphia rally would be my first major public appearance since being released. People were expecting a lot of me, and I worked hard on the speech. In the meantime, the Philadelphia police were determined to prevent the conference from taking place. A few days before it was scheduled to begin, they raided the Black Panther Party headquarters and arrested most of the comrades. In a strong show of unity, the community came together within hours, reopened the office, handled the telephones, and went ahead with arrangements for the conference. This community support was living proof that we can never bring about the revolution without the people. On the other hand, I was disturbed by much of what I saw at the Philadelphia session. I tried in my speech to make some contribution to the people's understanding and advancement of their consciousness. What I wanted to show was that black people and other minorities in this country had been betrayed by the American Constitution, the legal foundation of government. I stressed that the United States of America came into being at a time when the nation compromised a narrow strip of land on the eastern seaboard and whose population was small and homogeneous, both racially and culturally. The economic system then was different too, essentially agricultural. A small population and fertile land meant that the people were able to advance according to their motivation and ability. In this way, democratic capitalism flourished in the new nation. Then I went on to say more. But before I get into more, I like the idea of having a revolutionary constitutional convention because I think one of the ways we can have this bloodless revolution is by setting up a parallel society. We don't have to, start doming cops or bombing federal buildings. We can just set up our own police force. We can set up our own type of federal types of institutions, if you get what I'm saying. We don't have to go to their schools. We can create our own schools. And if you want to think of this in a racial nationalist sense, like some cultural nationalists do in, black thought, they tend to say, okay, let's set up a Afrocentric black school and have an all-black police force where everybody's dressed head to toe like Bobby Seale. No, I mean, you could also set it up where the people who are marginalized today organize, find common ground, and create parallel societies and communities, and that starts with creating their own constitution. I like that idea. But I'm going to continue here. As you're reading, I'm getting more and more disappointed with one battle after another. That's a very good point Acti brings up. The film, One Battle After Another, is sort of based on this, pseudo 1970s revolutionary aesthetic, right? But they do it so badly. But I feel like had Paul Thomas Anderson, whatever that guy's name, if he actually read some revolutionary material like this, he would have a much better grasp. You know what I'm saying? And the film would have came out much better. But I digress. Let's continue here. Huey P says, the following years were to see this new nation rapidly develop into a multi-limbed giant. The new nation acquired land and spread from a narrow strip on the eastern seaboard to cover almost the entire continent. The new nation acquired a population to fill this newly acquired land. This population was drawn from the continents of Africa, Asia, Europe, and South America. Thus, a nation conceived by homogeneous people of a small number and in a small area grew into a nation of heterogeneous people comprising a large number and spread across an entire continent. This changed in the fundamental characteristics of the nation and its people substantially changed the nature of American society. Furthermore, the social changes were marked by economic changes. A rural and agricultural economy became an urban and industrialized economy, as farming was replaced by manufacturing. The democratic capitalism of our early days became caught up in a relentless drive to obtain profits until the selfish motivation for profit eclipsed the unselfish principles of democracy. Thus, 200 years later, we have an overdeveloped economy, which is so infused with the need for profit that we have replaced democratic capitalism with bureaucratic capitalism. The free opportunity of all men to pursue their economic ends has been replaced by constraints, confinement, placed upon Americans by the large corporations which control and direct our economy. They have sought to increase their profits at the expense of the people, and particularly at the expense of the racial and ethnic minorities. And that's the argument I bring up whenever people talk about we need black capitalism. We need black buying power. We need to buy up the block. Brother, start that LLC and that S-Corp, and then we're this much closer to freedom. Basically, what he's saying here is that the capitalistic system eventually leads to a system where people are unable to freely live because they're chained to money. People cannot freely choose what they want to do because they need money to survive. Now, that is not the liberation that I want for any of our people. For any of our people. And that's not the liberation I want for all people either. I'm going to continue here. So we find evidence for majority freedom and minority oppression in the fact that even while the early settlers were proclaiming their freedom, they were deliberately and systematically depriving Africans of their freedom. Generation after generation of the majority group have been born. They have worked and they have seen the fruits of their labors in the life, liberty, and happiness of their children and grandchildren. Generation after generation of black people in America have been born. They have worked and they have seen the fruits of their labors in the life, liberty, and happiness of the children and grandchildren of their oppressors, while their own descendants wallow in the mire of poverty and deprivation, holding only to the hope of change in the future. This hope has sustained us for many years and has led us to suffer the administrations of a corrupt government. At the dawn of the 20th century, this hope led us to formulate a civil rights movement in the belief that the government would eventually fulfill its promise to black people. We did not recognize, however, that any attempt to complete the promise of an 18th century revolution in the framework of a 20th century government was doomed to failure. The descendants of that small company of original settlers of this land are not among the common people of today. They have become a small ruling class in control of a worldwide economic system. The Constitution set up by their ancestors to serve the people no longer does so, for the people have changed. The people of the 18th century have become the ruling class of the 20th century, and the people of the 20th century are the descendants of the slaves and dispossessed of the 18th century. The Constitution set up to serve the people of the 18th century now serves the ruling class of the 20th century. And the people of today stand waiting for a foundation of their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. As I talked, it seemed to me that the people were not really listening or even interested in what I had to say. Almost every sentence was greeted with loud applause, but the audience was more concerned with phrase-mongering than with ideological development. I am not a good public speaker. I tend to lecture and teach in a rather dull fashion, but the people were not responding to my ideas, only to an image. And although I was very excited by all the energy and enthusiasm I saw there, I was also disturbed by the lack of serious analytical thought. This is one of the problems with Huey P. I think at his core, he was a philosopher. He wanted to be a university professor. He wanted to be a guy who, wrote boring books that were 300 pages long about how the capitalistic, industrial, military, prison complex, imperial state has divided people along gender lines. He wants to write a long ass he wants to write one of them dusty ass books that you'd be like, I know I want to read that one day when I got time. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I think his fatal flaw was, which is why I asked the people in the live stream chat, do you think Huey would have been still a major figure had he lived, if he were alive today? And I would argue no. I would say he would become a podcaster. he did get his PhD, so he was literally on track to become a professor. And so, yeah, like he was more suited, I think, not to lead the party, but be more of like the ideological force behind it, the mind behind it. You get what I'm saying? But I digress. I think that was his fatal flaw. And it's interesting that in this book, along with Asada's book, Angela Davis's book, in this one, he even admits, I suck at public speaking, because our two ladies said the same thing. But anyway, I'm going to continue. After Philadelphia, we tried to organize rallies across the country in preparation for the Washington Convention. We had been counting on Kathleen Cleaver's return to organize these rallies in support of Bobby and Ericka, since we knew that Kathleen could draw in people, speak effectively, and give us the boost we needed. Then, for reasons unfathomable to us at the time, Eldridge changed his mind and refused to let her come. This was a real setback. We had announced that Kathleen would be at the convention, but when Eldridge would not allow that, I tried to change the direction of the Washington meeting. In an important way, the convention marked a turning point in the party's development. Instead of focusing on a new constitution, we concentrated on plans for building community organizing programs. I sent out a directive to all chapters and branches telling them to come prepared to set up displays explaining community programs and to urge people to sign up for them. Then the comrades returned home. They would have a list of names of committed people who would be or who could be organized. For me, the theme of the convention in Washington was not a new constitution, but organization for survival. And from that time on, we began to refer to the party community programs as survival programs. The whole idea of the community programs had been developed by Bobby Seale while I was in prison, and his brilliant organizing methods had helped to establish them. The Breakfast for Children program was first set up. Other programs, clothing distribution centers, liberation schools, housing, prison projects, and medical centers soon followed. We called them survival programs pending revolution, since we needed long-term programs and a disciplined organization to carry them out. You know, it's funny because this is another cool thing about reading is that you'll be surprised who else has read the books that you're reading or were informed or tied to the context of the text that you're reading. So, as you know, one of my favorite rappers is Tupac Shakur. Tupac was the son of Afeni Shakur, a notable Black Panther, and there's a line in one of my favorite Tupac songs, Straight Ballin'. He says, I'm getting ghost on the 5-0, fuck them hoes, got a 45, yelling out survival. And I've been listening to that song since I was 14 years old. And I never understood that line. And I'm old enough that Rap Genius did not exist. So don't come with me like, oh, why don't you just go to Rap Genius? So now that I'm reading Huey P. Newton's book, this is my first time hearing that the Black Panthers called their community programs, like the free breakfast program, their survival programs. And Tupac Shakur either read this in Huey P. Newton's book or from his mother, the famous Black Panther, Afeni Shakur, knew about the survival programs. So when he's saying, getting ghost on the 5-0, I'm disappearing on the cops, fuck them hoes, fuck the police, I got a 45, pistol, and I'm yelling out survival. Like, you know what I mean? Like the survival programs of the Black Panther parties. So very dope. I was telling Acti about this the other day, and I just wanted to share it with the people as well. But continuing here, Huey continues to talk about these survival programs pending revolution. We needed long-term programs and a disciplined organization to carry them out. They were designed to help the people survive until their consciousness is raised, which is only the first step in the revolution to produce a new America. I frequently use the metaphor of the raft to describe the survival programs. A raft put into service during a disaster, but to help one get through a difficult time. During a flood, the raft is a life-saving device, but it is only a means of getting to higher and safer ground. So too, with survival programs, which are emergency services. In themselves, they do not change social conditions, but they are life-saving vehicles until conditions change. The Washington Convention could have been a great leap forward, but nothing worked out well. Howard University had agreed to host the convention, but at the last minute the university withdrew its facilities, and the Comrades had to find another hall. Some churches made space available, so we were able to hold our workshops and meetings in them. But there was poor planning, poor coordination, and a deficiency in skills needed to organize and execute such a gigantic undertaking. Another weakness was the diffuseness of goals among those who came to the convention, especially among the whites. My goals were different from theirs. They had been drawn to the party by Eldridge's rhetoric, and their views had come to influence too many of our activities. I made up my mind that we would not let white radicals define the struggles for us. They knew too little about the black experience and life in black communities. Deep into the violence of the revolution, they wanted the Black Panthers to write a new constitution, overthrow the government by force, and implement it. When this did not come about in Washington, we got critical letters claiming we were no longer the vanguard of the movement. I paid no attention. In fact, we were glad to be rid of the radicals because all they did was talk. Those who understood the true nature of revolution stood with us. The defection of both Eldridge Cleaver and the party were summed up in the shambles of the Washington Convention. Cleaver was demanding that we act out his fantasies of instant power. In Philadelphia, the crowds had been overwhelmingly black. They kept us down to earth. But in Washington, the white radicals' fantasies and those of Cleaver merged. And we, the all-too-human Black Panthers, could not gratify them. In metaphysical streets, I love that line, in metaphysical streets. In metaphysical streets, Cleaver and the infantile leftists were waiting on corners for the revolution to come to them. We were not able to hand down a manifesto like Moses on Sinai. Our grievous error had been that for a moment in time we too had joined the suicidal dance around the golden calf. The bad news from Washington, D.C., the city of lies, was that the American Revolution had only reached the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. In the months after my case, I traveled from city to city, meeting comrades and doing what I could to organize committees for Ericka and Bobby. In my travels, I observed the work being done in dozens of communities and saw evidence that the Black Panthers had built a strong organization. But we needed to do more, much more. We had the base now on which to construct a potent social force in the country. But some of our leading comrades lacked the comprehensive ideology needed to analyze events and phenomena in a creative, dynamic way. We had tried to develop their understanding in political education classes. Now we needed a structure, and after discussion in the Central Committee, we organized the Ideological Institute in Oakland in December 1970. It was formed to train our more advanced comrades to observe and define phenomena along lines set down by the Black Panther Party. I have thought a good bit since my release about new ideas and concepts, but I could not be, the only one developing ideas and programs. Given the opportunity, other comrades would be able to come up with imaginative programs and fresh solutions as they encountered changing conditions. This is essential for the advance of revolutionary thought. The Ideological Institute has succeeded in providing the comrades with an understanding of dialectical materialism. About 300 brothers and sisters attend classes to study in depth the works of great Marxist thinkers and philosophers. Shout out to Huey for this, because I really like this idea. We have to ideologically train our thinkers, our revolutionaries, our fighters. And what I like about this is that, it's sort of like a parallel institution. Instead of going to a university hoping to get, education to become more radical, more informed, and more aware of how to fight, let's just create our own institution. Let's create our own college. And the Ideological Institute of the Black Panthers is a very, very dope institution. Very powerful idea. The idea that we can take education back and train thinkers who are able to lead and develop. I like that. Anyway, continuing here. Meanwhile, our efforts on behalf of Bobby and Ericka continued. On one of my trips to New Haven to prepare for the trial, I met Erik Erikson, the renowned author and professor of developmental psychology at Harvard. His son, Kai, a sociologist and master at Trumbull College at Yale, thought it would be interesting for us to hold a series of discussions. I agreed, and he arranged a 3-day seminar in early February of 1971 at Yale University in which 2 faculty members and 14 Yale students, 8 white and 6 black, also took part. The discussions were held in the library of Yale University Press. I liked Ericka very much, and we got along well despite some trouble communicating during the first 2 days of the seminar. At first, we repeatedly talked past each other, and the students talked such madness that they impeded our conversation. They had come to hear revolutionary slogans and violent rhetoric, and were not satisfied with anything less than absolute solutions to the problems besetting society. The talks centered on Black Panther ideology, and Ericka saw the validity of the Black Panther approach. He pointed out that 2 people can love each other only when both have dignity. If one person is without dignity, then the relationship is something else. Ericka noted that it is necessary to understand the complexity of all issues and all relationships. He brought many insights to our talks, drawing on his early days as a student of Freud and his studies of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Although there were moments of frustration, I think we both learned much from each other. If you've heard of Ericka, let us know in the chat. I've never heard of Ericka before. Huey said he's a very famous developmental psychologist. It sounds like he was just a very good white ally. Anyway, go into the comments section here. In the other chat, Acty says, hey, who the F is Claire? Okay. All right. Her channel on YouTube is Secular Coransom. All right. Claire Kawal would like to talk to you. All right. This is what somebody says. Let's look up that channel real quick. Is this a real channel? Because I looked at Claire's content. Secular Coranism. The Epstein files are a distraction. Okay, I'm confused. This looks like an AI channel. I'm sorry. This looks like an AI channel. Secular Coranism. KL, I don't think this is a real channel. I'm sorry. I don't think that's a real person. I checked that channel, KL. It looks fake. Sorry, let me just answer this person real quick. Sorry, taking a quick break to reply to this comment right here. All right. All right, hold on. All right. I think that's an AI channel. KL. But listen, if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm not that hard to find. I'm down to do collabs. I'm down to do interviews. You just got to put it in the... You just got to send me an email and we can organize a collab where we both discuss or debate. I might do a call-in show where anybody can call in and debate and discuss anything with me. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. How many more pages in chapter 29? All right, we only have a few more pages in chapter 29, and then we have chapter 30 to get through, which is short. Okay, so we're almost done. We have maybe about 10 more pages before we wrap this up for the day. Hopefully you've been enjoying this live stream because we're keeping it very, we're keeping it real, man. It's Sunday. We're not going to slow down for nothing. So, hold on. All right, hold on. Wait. We got a few more. Okay, hold on. Where were we? Okay. All right. Huey P. Newton says, chapter 29, yes, chapter 29 of Revolutionary Suicides. Huey says, at the time of the Yale meeting with Ericka, my secretary was a party member named Connie Matthews. Connie was from the West Indies, but she had migrated to Europe and lived for a time in one of the Scandinavian countries. She claimed to speak several languages fluently, hearing Bobby Seale speak on one of his European trips while I was still in prison. At first, she stayed in Europe to organize groups there, but later moved to our Algerian embassy under the direction of Eldridge Cleaver. Less than 2 months after my release from prison, Eldridge sent her to Oakland to work out of central headquarters, where she was assigned to handle the details of my travel, speaking engagements, and the like. I found her somewhat unreliable and several times considered sending her back to Algiers, but Eldridge insisted she remain in Oakland. She remained in Oakland. Once again, for the ADOS FBA people who say that black Americans need to only stick together, and I know there are some people that are more nuanced in their thinking and say, well, FBA can ally with certain people, but only if they're on code. In here, Huey P. Newton is saying he was working literally, his secretary was a black woman from the West Indies, Connie Matthews. Connie Matthews was not a foundational black American, but yet and still she was supportive of the Black Panther Party, showing once again throughout Huey's book that allyship, international solidarity, and not being racial nationalist or cultural nationalist is the way forward. But I'm going to continue here. So, in late 1970, she had married Michael Setawayu Tabor, a Black Panther from New York and one of the 21 defendants in that circus of the state called a conspiracy trial, which I think is the Panther 21 case. Setawayu was an effective organizer and a good speaker, but he had suffered through some heavy drug and prison scenes. He fell completely under Connie's spell. When the meetings with Ericka came to an end, Connie and Setawayu disappeared, taking many of my personal papers with them. Of course, when Tabor jumped bail, this placed the other New York 21 in jeopardy. But more than that, I was puzzled about where they might have gone. Connie was not a citizen and would have trouble staying in the United States. Setawayu was a fugitive who could not travel easily outside the country unless he went to Cuba or Algiers. I did not think they would go to Cuba. They were not hard workers, and if they went to Algiers, they would be right in our hands. But the Algerian possibility started me thinking. After considering the alternatives, I began to suspect that something was wrong between Eldridge Cleaver in Algiers and the Central Committee of the party in Oakland. But I said nothing. Without enough evidence to be certain, I decided to wait and see. In the meantime, a big rally was planned for Oakland on March 5th, 1971, to kick off a large-scale effort in support of all political prisoners, with the main focus on the trial of Bobby and Ericka in New Haven. The rally, called the Intercommunal Day of Solidarity, was scheduled for the Oakland Auditorium. The keynote speaker would be Kathleen Cleaver, with musical entertainment provided by the Grateful Dead and the Lumpen, a Black Panther group whose primary purpose was not entertainment, but political education through music and song. We wanted to attract a broad cross-section of the Bay Area community. While we made preparations, I talked a number of times with Eldridge by telephone, and although we had some disagreement about strategy and tactics, we did agree that the rally should come off as planned. However, doubt grew in our minds whether Kathleen would show up. We had good reason for uncertainty. At the Revolutionary Constitutional Convention in Washington the previous November, she had failed to appear. But when I expressed these doubts to Eldridge, he assured me that Kathleen would be there. In addition to the Oakland rally, we were planning a series of meetings across the country featuring Kathleen and local speakers. These rallies were meant to attract people whom we could organize into groups to work for the various trials as well as participate in the survival programs the party was developing. In order to publicize the Intercommunal Day of Solidarity, I had agreed to appear on a local TV talk show. My appearance will be a means of using the oppressor's media to carry our message to the people. By the way, we hit page 300 of this text, and there's only 335 pages, so we're almost done. And you know how it is. Every time we reach page 300, we take a shot. Every time we reach 100 pages, we take a shot. Take a shot at every 100 pages we read from a text. Anyway. So about 3 hours before the show, I had an idea and called Eldridge to discuss it with him. The TV show was one in which people called in to ask questions, but I suggested a reversal of this procedure. The show's host would call Eldridge in Algeria, talk about the rally on the air, and announce that Kathleen was coming to speak. I knew this would arouse interest and increase attendance. Best of all, it would be done at the expense of the media. The station was enthusiastic, but when I told Eldridge of the plan, he liked it too, and said he would be prepared for the call. When I arrived at the station that morning, I felt optimistic. We were getting the best local publicity, a large crowd would attend the rally. We had begun to build a strong base for our work to free political prisoners. Then the call to Eldridge went through, and the world turned upside down. At first, I could not believe what he was doing. He launched into party business, not only party business, but Central Committee business, beginning with the Central Committee's expulsion of Connie Matthews Tabor, Setawayo Tabor, the New York 21, and Elmer Geronimo Pratt, a Black Panther from Los Angeles. All these Black Panthers were guilty of serious offenses, actions that had jeopardized other comrades and the party. The New York 21 had written an open letter to the Weathermen saying that they felt the leadership of the party had lost its revolutionary fervor and that the Weathermen were the true vanguard of the revolution. That was all right with us if they wanted to take that position. But the Central Committee decided that with that statement, the New York 21 had resigned from the party. Expulsion was simply a party recognition of the facts. In the other cases, there was no ample evidence to justify the actions of the Central Committee. Now, in this public setting, before thousands of viewers, Eldridge chose to disagree with the actions of the Central Committee. However, he did not attack me. He attacked David Hilliard, the Chief of Staff. Eldridge accused David of having allowed the party to fall apart and said that we had expelled many loyal comrades without sufficient cause. I disagreed with him and defended David. David had done a good job of sustaining the party while I was in jail, often working with scant support, yet keeping things together from coast to coast. In my opinion, if anyone was at fault, it was me. Whatever wrongs there were in the party, I said, I took full responsibility. We very angry about Eldridge's stunt, I nevertheless kept calm. And after Eldridge and I finished talking, I answered questions from listeners. But my mind was no longer on the show. I was trying to figure out why Eldridge had pulled this act in public, particularly when just 3 hours earlier he had agreed to participate. What was going on? Even as I began to understand, as detail fell into place in my mind, I still believed there was a contradiction that could be handled within the party structure. It had not occurred to me that Eldridge might want to undermine the party. On leaving the TV studio, I went straight to a payphone and placed a call to Eldridge. I had been cool in public, but I was seething inside, and I wanted him to know my real feelings. When we were connected, I let him have it. He had shown no concern for the political prisoners. And on this occasion, when we had an unusual opportunity to make a major move to organize behind them, he had gone on an individualistic trip, talking madness. Bobby's New Haven trial was just beginning. We had no idea what the outcome would be. Yet Eldridge had shown complete disregard for him and all others facing trial. When I finished, I flew to Boston, and there I called Eldridge again. What I did not know when I made these two calls was that I was not talking to a man, but to a tape recorder. Eldridge taped my calls and then released them to NBC in New York, which played my private, privileged remonstrance over the American network. The Ministry of Information had set me up. He was committing reactionary suicide and was trying to take me down with him. I think Eldridge Cleaver was COINTELPRO. The brother was very bright and articulate, but I think he was COINTELPRO, man, because he's moving like a Fed. Eldridge is moving like a Fed, taping calls and sending them to NBC. What is wrong with you? It soon became clear that Eldridge had organized a plot to subvert the work of the party and sacrifice Bobby and Ericka to the establishment. He had done this by questioning party ideology and by attempting to turn a number of Black Panthers against the party and the Central Committee. Immediately after these public charges against Hilliard, the key members in 4 Black Panther branches in New York and 1 in New Jersey publicly announced that they supported Eldridge and thereby resigned from the party. Obviously, this campaign had been planned well in advance. The perpetrators were only waiting for a propitious time to carry it out. The final evidence of the plot came when Connie Matthews Tabor and Michael Setawayu turned up in Algiers. Everything pointed to the fact that Eldridge had sent Connie here in October of 1970 with subversion in mind, and it finally came to pass in February 1971. Eldridge's defection was now out in the open. Yeah, this is a coup. This is a mastermind plot to take over the Black Panther Party by Eldridge Cleaver and tear apart the party that he's leaving behind. Crazy. So the next few weeks were tense, but we went ahead with our preparations for the Intercommunal Day of Solidarity on March 5th. I was now to be the keynote speaker. I knew that everybody at the rally would expect me to say something about Cleaver in answer to all the charges he was making against us through transatlantic interviews. But when the night of the rally arrived, I decided against mentioning him and gave a brief address with no direct reference. The rally was a great success. It raised people's awareness of the survival programs and brought increased support for political prisoners. More and more people from the Black community were joining us in our determination that political oppression, imprisonment, and even death would not deter us from our efforts to free our imprisoned brothers and sisters. The spring and summer following the rally brought increased momentum into my life. The survival program, the ideological institute, the reorganization of the party required my full attention. And events, both tragic and joyful, rushed in on one another during those months. At the end of May, Bobby and Ericka, who had been defended by Charles Gary, were acquitted of the false charges brought against them by the state of Connecticut. After a brief delay, Bobby was released, and he and Ericka returned to Oakland to resume their work in the community. Seeing Bobby again was a moving experience. We had not been together on the streets of Oakland since August 1967, in the early uncertain days of the Black Panther Party. Now, almost 4 years later, we were once again on the block with our comrades. We had gone through a great deal of danger and pain during those years, but we had survived, stronger and more committed than ever. Everything we had suffered had been worth the price, and during that time the party had grown from a local group to a network of branches and chapters in North America and abroad. Many of our noble warriors had been cut down, and other early members had shown themselves unable to withstand the pressure of a protracted revolutionary struggle. But we were happy to be together again, united in our goals for our people. Just reading that paragraph, you know what I mean? Just imagine like two boys, like 2 young men with a dream, you know what I'm saying? To like make a better world. And, you know, they just start off in Oakland, you know what I'm saying? Carrying guns and law books, trailing police, building goodwill in the community, and, you know, becoming more and more powerful, more big, you know what I'm saying? The next thing you know, one of the boys gets taken down for a false murder on a cop. The other one tries to hold him down while he's inside, and he gets charged for the same thing. So by the time the first guy comes out, the other one is inside prison, but both of them beat the case, and then they're back out on the street years later, and now the organization that they founded had become international, not only national, but international. Black Panthers in the UK, Black Panthers in Algeria, you know what I'm saying? This is just an incredible story. An incredible, remarkably inspiring story. And I'm just imagining Huey P and Bobby Seale riding around in a car, you know what I mean, just them in Oakland in 1967, and then 4 years later, them riding around in a car, you know what I'm saying, after all of that transpired, and how amazing that must have been, you know what I'm saying, just to be with your boy like that again, you know what I'm saying, pause, no Diddy, but like after going through, like facing death row, facing the electric chair, facing the gas chamber, you know what I'm saying? And you done changed the world. And both of you are barely 25 years old. Both of you are barely, think about that. That's an incredible story. An amazing, inspiring story for Black History Month. Incredible, man. I love that paragraph right here. And I love this book so much. Anyway, continuing here in Revolutionary Suicide, chapter 29 of Huey P. Newton's autobiography. The establishment, however, was determined to keep us on the defensive. The district attorney of Alameda County began his moves to have me tried a second time. Even more serious were his efforts to railroad Chief of Staff David Hilliard into prison on the trumped-up charge that had come from the shootout on April 6, 1968, when Bobby Hutton had been murdered. The charge, assault with a deadly weapon against a police officer known to be in pursuit of his duty. David had been arrested that night, although there was no evidence that he had a weapon or even that he was at the scene of the shootout. Yet the district attorney who conducted his prosecution got the kind of jury he wanted, as they usually do, and was able to lead them into convicting David on these charges, even though the district attorney himself could not prove that David had a weapon. Once again, the Black Panther Party got the kind of justice we had come to expect. In July, David was sentenced to serve 1 to 10 years in the state prison and was quickly whisked off to Vacaville, as I had been 3 years earlier. During the 5 years since the party had been formed, it always seemed that time was measured, not in days or months or hours, but by the movements of comrades and brothers in and out of prison and by the dates of hearings, releases, and trials. Our lives were regulated not by the ordinary tempo of daily events, but by the forced clockwork of the judicial process. No sooner had David begun serving his term than we turned our attention to the upcoming trial of George Jackson, who had been falsely charged with killing a prison guard at San Quentin. His trial was scheduled for August 23rd. 2 days before it was to begin, on August 21st, while attempting to save his brothers in a San Quentin cell block from being massacred by guards, he was shot and killed by his enemies. He had fulfilled his own prophecy. I know that they will not be satisfied until they've pushed me out of this existence altogether. Wow. So, once again, this story is just so inspiring, man. I don't know how anybody could not read this book, even if you're not a fan of Huey's brand of revolutionary activity, even if you're not a leftist, even if you hate black people. You could hate black people and still love Huey P. Newton because everything he went through is just so, inspiring, just on a human level. You know what I'm saying? To be so young, to be so brave, to be so principled, to be so disciplined, to be so forward thinking. You know what I'm saying? At this day, at that time, you know what I'm saying? It's incredibly inspiring. You don't even have to be a far leftist to look at that man and say, that was a man right there. You know, and I'm not doing no hero worship. I'm not doing no glazing. You know what I'm saying? I'm just admitting, you know what I'm saying? When you look at Huey's life, and especially what he did as a 25-year-old man, facing the death penalty, facing the world collapsing around him, being a poor black boy from the ghetto, you know what I'm saying? And he was able to change the world like that. It's hard to even imagine, man. It's hard to imagine. And it's so inspiring. Anyway, we have one more chapter to read. Before we call it a day. Hopefully you've been enjoying this live stream. It's been a long one, I know, but we're almost done. Chapter 30 of Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. The Black Panther is our brother and son, the one who wasn't afraid. George Jackson in Soledad Brother. Fallen Comrade. George Jackson had genius. Genius is rare enough and should be treasured. But when genius is combined in a black man with revolutionary passion and vision, the establishment will cut him down. Comrade Jackson understood this. He knew his days were numbered, and he was prepared to die as a true believer in revolutionary suicide. For 11 years, he insisted on remaining free in a brutal prison system. All along, he resisted the authorities and encouraged his brothers in prison to join him. The state retaliated. Parole was continually refused. Solitary confinement was imposed on him for 7 years. Threats on his life were frequent, from guards, from inmates who called themselves Hitler's helpers, from knife thrusts and pick handles of faceless sadistic pigs. And finally, they murdered him. In the months before his death, everything began to close in. He was one of the few prisoners who was shackled and heavily guarded for his infrequent trips to the visitor's room. Attempts on his life became almost daily occurrences, but he never gave in or retreated. Prison was the crucible that shaped his spirit, and George often used the words of Ho Chi Minh to describe his resistance. Calamity has hardened me and turned my mind to steel. I knew him like a brother. At first, I knew him only spiritually, through his writing and his legend in the prison system. When I was at the penal colony and he was at Soledad. Then, not long after my arrival, I received, through the prison grapevine, a request from George to join the Black Panther Party. It was readily granted. George was made a member of the People's Revolutionary Army. And the rank... Okay, so George Jackson did join the Black Panther Party. I made a mistake earlier. So then not long after my arrival, I received through the prison grapevine a request from George to join the Black Panther Party. George was made a member of the People's Revolutionary Army with the rank of General and Field Marshal. For the next 3 years, we were in constant communication by means of messages carried by friends and lawyers and inmates transferred from one prison to another. Despite the restrictions of the prison system, we managed to transmit our messages on paper and on tapes. Among George's contributions to the party were articles he wrote for the Black Panther newspaper, which furthered our revolutionary theory and provided inspiration for all the brothers. In February 1971, I received this letter from him. Wow, this letter was written on February 21st, 1971. Wow, close to, 50 years ago to the date. And it's titled, Comrade Huey. Things are quiet here right now. Tonight we have discipline and accord. Tomorrow all may fly apart again, but that's us. I have 2 articles that I would like to be put in the paper, one following the other by a week. The one on Angela first. Then, if you approve, I would like to contribute something to the paper every week or whenever you have space for me. If yes, let me know if there is any area in particular you would like me to comment on. Then do I comment as observer or participant? One favor, please don't let anyone delete the things I say or change them around. I don't need an editor unless what I say is not representative of the party line. Don't let anyone change a word. When I make an ideological error, of course, correct it to fit the party's position. And don't let them shorten or condense. If something is too long, part 1, part 2 it. If you want to use me to say nasty things about those who deserve it, it may be best for me to comment as an observer. That way less contradictions between yourself and the people you may have to work with. You told so-and-so that you and I had a misunderstanding once, but that it was cleared up. When was it that we misunderstood each other? Be very careful of messages or any word that has supposed to have come from me. I really don't recall any misunderstanding. People lie for many reasons. Try to memorize my handwriting. That is how all messages will come in the future, if we have a future. Did you know that Angela and I were married a while back? Yeah, Angela Davis did marry George Jackson. Talk about a power couple. I'm going to tell my kids that was Jay-Z and Beyonce. Angela Davis and George Jackson. Anyway. And I had almost pulled her all the way into our camp just before Eldridge made that statement. Yeah, I think it's understood. If I remember right, Angela Davis never joined the Black Panther Party. She was always a member of the Communist Party, never a Black Panther. Anyway, I had done so well, in fact, that the Communist Party tried to cut our contacts, attack my sanity in little whispers and looks in conversing with her, and cut off my paid subscription to their 2 newspapers. Strange that they would be afraid of the FBI and not afraid of the cat. Perhaps they've reached an understanding, some of them anyway. Is so-and-so still a Communist Party member? Man, what's happening with her? She has no control at all of her mouth or ego. Arrange for a good contact or write and seal messages with a thumbprint. I've had ideas I'd like to leave with you all. Thanks, brother, for helping us. Beautiful, hard, disciplined brothers in here. I'd like to deliver them to you someday. And that's it from George. Very interesting for Huey to leak this letter. I wonder what's the point of leaking that, to be frank. I understand he wants to show, George and him were very tight and also the type of communication they had. But some of that could have been private, I think. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say about George Jackson right here, but it sort of slipped my mind. Oh yeah, I wanted to say, imagine an alternative past where Eldridge Cleaver stayed in jail and George Jackson was free, and he was the Minister of Information, because from the letter, from how it reads, George Jackson was a loyal soldier, but also a leader. He knew how to be a leader and a soldier, and that's one of the hardest things to find in people and organizations. Soldiers who can also be leaders, and leaders who can also be soldiers. But Eldridge Cleaver was just a mess. Had George Jackson been outside and he had teamed up with Huey, I think the Black Panthers might have had a longer run, a more sustainable run at least. Anyway, we have a few more pages, about 5 more pages to go until we wrap this up. Let's continue here. So, in the last 3 years of his life, Comrade George Jackson felt sustained and supported by the Black Panther Party. He had struggled alone for so long to raise the consciousness of black inmates, and his example encouraged thousands who were weaker and less intrepid than he. But the price he paid in alienation and reprisals was fearsome. Within the party, he was no longer alone. He became a part of the burgeoning and invincible revolutionary liberation movement. In his second book, Blood in My Eye, he expressed this faith. The Black Panther Party is the largest and most powerful political force existing outside establishment politics. It draws this power from the people. It is the people's natural political vanguard. George asked the party to publish his first book, Soledad Brother, but in the difficult negotiations between go-betweens and without direct contact, the arrangements fell through. To make sure this mistake would never happen again, he left his estate and all his writings to the party. More important, he bequeathed us his spirit and his love. Beautiful. George's funeral was held in Oakland on August 28, 1971, exactly 1 week after his murder, at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church, pastored by Father Earl Neal. A crowd of about 7,000 friends gathered to pay their last respects to our fallen comrade, and the Black Panther Party had a large contingent of comrades on hand to handle the crowd and protect the Jackson family. I arrived at the church shortly before the funeral cortege. The second-floor sanctuary was empty, but from the window I could see the crowd stretching for more than a block in each direction, filling every available space and closing off the streets to motor traffic. A number of Black Panthers sat talking quietly downstairs. Occasionally, they relieved the comrades who were controlling the crowd and directing traffic outside. The children from the Intercommunal Youth Institute were there, and although they had been in the building since early morning, they did not complain of weariness. The children felt the loss of George deeply when they had learned of his death the previous week. All of them had written messages of condolences to their mother. They loved George, and in their faces I could see their determination to grow up and fulfill his dreams of liberation. Tensions were high. We had received many threats the previous week, from prison guards, from police, and from many others, stating that the funeral would not be held. And if it was, there would be cause for more funerals of Black Panthers. We were ready for anything. The comrades were angry about the threats, and they were righteously angry about the continued oppression of the poor and black people who lived in this land. You could see it in their faces, in their measured, firm strides, in their clenched fists, and in their voices as they greeted the hearse with shouts of power to the people and long live the spirit of George Jackson. When the funeral cortege arrived, Bobby and I prepared to meet the people in it as they entered the door of the church. It was the first time Bobby and I had shared a public platform in over 4 years. But there was no cause for rejoicing. We said nothing to each other. We knew only too well what the other was thinking. As the casket bearing the body of Comrade George was brought into the sanctuary, a song was playing. Nina Simone singing, "I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free." Inside the church, the walls were ringed with Black Panthers carrying shotguns. George had said that he wanted no flowers at his funeral, only shotguns. In honoring his request, we were also protecting his family and all those who were dedicated to carrying on in his spirit. Any person who entered that sanctuary with the purpose of starting some madness would know that he did not stand a chance of going very far. In death, even as in life, George thought about the best interest of his companions. Father Neal made a short but powerful statement about the lesson of George Jackson's death, that black people would have to get off their knees and take their destiny in their own hands. Bobby read some of the many messages from around the world. Elaine Brown saying, "One time's too much to tell any man that he's not free." And I delivered the eulogy, which went in part. Huey P. Newton says, at George Jackson's funeral, "George Jackson was my hero. He set a standard for prisoners, political prisoners, for people. He showed the love, the strength of the revolutionary fervor characteristic of any soldier for the people. He inspired prisoners, whom I later encountered, to put his ideas into practice, and so his spirit became a living thing. Today, I say that although George's body has fallen, his spirit goes on, because his ideas live. And we will see that these ideas stay alive, because they'll be manifested in our bodies and in these young Panthers' bodies, who are our children. So it's a true saying that there will be a revolution from one generation to the next. This was George's legacy, and he will go on. He will go on into immortality, because we believe that the people will also win. We know the people will win as they advance generation upon generation. What kind of standard did George Jackson set? First, he was a strong man without fear, determined, full of love, strength, and dedication to the people's cause. He lived a life that we must praise. No matter how he was oppressed, no matter how wrongly he was done, he still kept the love for the people. And this is why he felt no pain in giving up his life for the people's cause. Even after his death, George Jackson is a legendary figure and a hero. Even the oppressor realizes this. To cover their murder, they say that George Jackson killed 5 people, 5 oppressors, and wounded 3 in the space of 30 seconds. You know, sometimes I like to overlook the fact that this would be physically impossible. But after all, George Jackson is my hero, and I would like to think that it was possible. I would be very happy thinking that George Jackson had the strength, because that would have made him Superman. Of course, my hero would have to be a Superman, and we will raise our children to be like George Jackson, to live like George Jackson, and to fight for freedom as George Jackson fought for freedom. All right. Shout out to Nelson Moreno up in the live stream. Says he's been watching, but he ain't been speaking. Hey, you can do whatever you like. On this channel, you're supposed to kick back, learn. You can engage if you want, whatever you like. But we are continuing, and we are finishing up our reading for today of A Revolutionary Suicide. Revolutionary Suicide, the autobiography of Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panther Party. Continuing here. George's last statement, the example of his conduct at San Quentin on that terrible day, left a standard for political prisoners and for the prisoner society of racist, reactionary America. He left a standard for the liberation armies of the world. He showed us how to act. He demonstrated how the unjust would be criticized by the weapon. And this will certainly be true, because the people will take care of that. George also said that once the oppressor is very strong and he might beat him down, he might beat us down to our very knees. He might crush us to the ground, but it will be physically impossible for the oppressor to go on. At some point, his legs will get tired, and when his legs get tired, then George Jackson and the people will tear his kneecaps off. So we will be very practical. We won't make statements and believe that the things the prison officials say. They're incredible stories about one man killing 5 people in 30 seconds. We will go on and live very realistically. There will be pain and much suffering in order for us to develop. But even in our suffering, I see his strength growing. I see the example that George set living on. We know that all of us will die someday. But we know that there are 2 kinds of deaths, the reactionary death and the revolutionary death. One death is significant and the other is not. George certainly died in a significant way, and his death will be very heavy, while the deaths of the ones that fell that day in San Quentin will be lighter than a feather. That's based on the Quran. Like, the death of a martyr is heavy. The death of a martyr is heavy, but the death of a kafir is light as a feather. You know what I mean? So anyway, George certainly died in a significant way, and his death will be very heavy, while the deaths of the ones that fell that day in San Quentin will be lighter than a feather. Even those who support them now will not support them in the future, because we're determined to change their minds. We'll change their minds, or else in the people's name, we'll all have to wipe them out thoroughly, wholly, absolutely, and completely. All power to the people. All words are inadequate to express the pain one feels over a fallen comrade. But in a poem, my brother Melvin came closer than anyone in voicing our feelings about the loss of George Jackson. This will be the final thing we're reading today, the poem written for George Jackson by Huey P. Newton's brother, Melvin. Shout out to everybody who joined the live stream. I will be doing shout outs at the end of this poem that we're going to read. If you have any last comments or questions that you want me to react to, put them in the chat right now so I can get to it after we read this poem. And the poem goes something like this. It's titled, We Called Him the General. The sky is blue. Today is clear and sunny. The house that George once lived in headed for the grave. While the panther spoke of the spirit, I saw a man move cat-like across the rooftops, glide along the horizons, casting no shadow, only chains into the sea, using his calloused hands and broken feet to smash and kick down barriers. The angels say his name is George Lester Jackson. El General. All the people went home to their hovels, he to the world of gods, heroes, tall men, giants. He went like the rushing wind, the rolling tide, the thunder's roar, the lightning's flash, smashing all challengers and devils in his path, while caressing the leaves, sand, and sky. Rest in peace, George Jackson, and shout out to everybody who joined this live stream. We are almost done with revolutionary suicide. We literally have, what's 35 minus 12? 35 minus 12. That's 23 pages, I think. We have about 23 pages left in this book. So we will be finishing this book tomorrow. This will be the conclusion of our 18th book in our Book React series. For the conclusion of Revolutionary Suicide, we will be reading chapter 31, Surviving, chapter 32, China, chapter 33, The Defection of Eldridge and Reactionary Suicide, and then, I guess, the epilogue. We'll wrap up the whole reading of this text tomorrow. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's a very dope book. I'm very much enjoying it. Not every part is my favorite, but overall I find this book to be valuable, insightful, and very moving, and something that we should all try to read and grasp. In conclusion, let's do the shout-outs. Shout out to Nelson Moreno. Shout out to Acti. Shout out to Stevie England. Shout out to Claire Peace. Shout out to I Am the Bars. Shout out to Bill Clancy. Shout out to Moon51. Shout out to TDM-Y1C. Shout out to O Chance MLG. Shout out to Nanny P and everybody else who joined the live stream. Let's close this right here. And on this side, let me give a shout out to KL9649. Shout out to KL9649 and everybody else who joined the live stream. I would love to see the results of the poll. So, and the poll in the horizontal live stream, I'm doing separate poll questions. So the poll question on this side was, would you have joined the Panthers in the 1970s? We had 2 votes on that one. 1 vote for yes and 1 vote for fuck Donald Trump and MAGA. I like that answer. Okay. And let's go to the second live stream, the vertical one. All right. The results for that one with 13 votes, Huey P. Newton would still be a prominent leader if alive today. 46% said yes. 46% said unsure. I assume 1 vote for no, 8%. And fuck Donald Trump and MAGA got 0%. No, that's too low. That's too low for fuck Donald Trump and MAGA. We need more for that. But anyway, shout out once again to everybody who joined. We're going to wrap this up right here. Y'all be easy out there. And peace. All power to the people. All power to the people.